Welcome to the Unlucky Sperm Club podcast, where we prove that you're not a victim of your circumstances, but a product of your choices. I am your host, Nelson Tressler. This episode is brought to you by the revolutionary goal achievement program, I Got Smarter, Goals Elevated. 10 minutes a day and $10 a month can increase your goal achievement by as much as 95%. I Got Smarter, Goals Elevated is available at igotsmarter.com and both on Apple and Android at the App Store. As always, on the Unlucky Sperm Club podcast, we are all about to get lucky with some words of wisdom from today's guest. Adam Coleman is the author of the book, Black Victim to Black Victor. He was fatherless, homeless, and had a lot of other hurdles that we're going to get in today. Welcome to the show, Adam.
Thank you for having me.
Well, I appreciate you being on. I like to start off every show by my guests giving me their, best piece of advice that we can start off with, something that'll have people pulling their car over to the side of the road to write it down. Do you have something like that you can share right away?
Yes. I think my general message that I like to tell people is that God is giving you the strength to overcome no matter what the obstacle is. So as long as you realize that God has blessed you, then you can do whatever you choose to. It's just a matter of if you realize that strength is inside you.
Yeah, love that. And grateful that you're willing to share that. I know talking about God is not the most popular thing in today's society. So I appreciate it. I guess that has that faith. So appreciate it. Well, Adam, let's get into your story a little bit. And why don't you start and give us that 10,000 foot version of who you are and what you're out here trying to accomplish.
Sure. So, I'm 36 years old. I'm obviously a Black American. And what I've done throughout my life is try to overcome the different challenges that were placed in front of me, whether it be in my childhood or adulthood. And a lot of my story is the struggle from the transition of the child into a man and knowing what a man is and becoming someone that's productive. And at the age of 21, I became a father. So not only struggling to figure out who I am, but also teaching my son how to be a man over the years. So my book was inspired to be written for my son because, for one, I never want him to feel like he can't do something as long as he puts the hard work into it. And I never want him to feel like he's a victim, in general society, that he's incapable because of some trait that he may have or some circumstance that he's been placed into. I wanted to leave something that was a positive legacy for my son, but also to tell my story in a way that he could understand where I came from. I think a lot of kids don't fully understand their fathers or their parents in general. And a lot of times the parents want to hide the pain that they experience because they want to shield their kids away from it. But I think showing that pain it's a strength. It's a strength to push out, and allowing for your children to see your parent as someone who's fallible and vulnerable actually makes your child understand you better and appreciate you more. So my son, knowing my background and knowing I grew up without a father, makes him appreciate having me around even more so.
Yeah, I love that. And one of the strategies that we teach is that things only have the meaning that you're willing to give them. And I had quite the unique origin story and dealt with some very trying things as well. Grew up without a father. So yeah, I can feel where you're coming from. But one of the things I think is we get to assign meaning to everything that happens to us in this life.
Right.
And I think I truly believe that. And I think if you're creative enough and look at things from enough angles, you can always find some sort of positive to everything that's happened to you in your life. And you grew up without a father in the home, correct?
Correct. Yes.
And so do you find yourself looking at that situation and trying to find the positive in that now that you're trying to convey a message onto your son?
Yeah, I mean, it took me years to find that, but today I can say that one of the positives that came out of my father not being there was that it made me not want to repeat what my father did, and it made me care even more about my son. Maybe even more so than if I did grow up with my father. I mean, obviously, I can't tell that for sure, but it does put a extra level of responsibility to not be what my father was.
You know what? I heard this, and I'm going to butcher it. But this guy told the story. He didn't have a father in the home either. He grew up without his father, and he had a dream or something, and it pretty much opened his eyes. And he had had sons, and
Mhm.
the sons were getting older, and his dream was, he was bitter and kind of had the victim mindset. But the dream was, would you have rather have had a father and missed out on what you've had with your children, or would you have rather have had all this stuff with your children? So he looked at it from his father's point of view, is
Mm.
his father missed out on all those great experiences that he had with his children. And then he started to have empathy for his father, for what his father had missed out on. Do you
Right.
feel that a lot with you? How many children do you have?
I just have one son.
Just one son. Okay. Do
Yeah.
you feel that within your own life? Like, you know what? I'd much have rather have not had a father and have a son than have it to be the other way.
To be honest with you, that's the first time anyone's ever put it in that particular way. I would obviously choose not having a father and having my son. Um, that's it's a weird, um, yeah, that's definitely something to really think about, because I think a lot of times we focus on the pain of not having, um, and then we're not appreciative of what we do have. Um, and I'm very appreciative of what I do have, and I don't really relish so much on not having my father. Sometimes it's hard to miss what you don't have, um, but I'm aware of the effects now, what as to why I struggled in life, why I felt certain ways, and I know where it stems from. So I'm cognizant of that particular situation and how it affected me throughout my life. But I don't I try not to relish on it. I try not to dwell on, or cry about missing my father or anything like that, or wishing something would have happened. It just didn't happen. I can't change the past. Um, but it does make me very appreciative of what I do have, and having my son and being attentive towards him and having him not go through the same things that I went through.
Yeah. No, I love that. And I love also what you just touched on was not really dwelling on the things that you can't control.
Right.
And, I think a lot of people are caught up in that resentment of things that happened in the past. And they pretty much drive their focus on all of those things. And, your book has the word victim in it. My book, The Unlucky Sperm Club, you are not a victim of your circumstances, but a product of your choices. I think we both have that same message is
Absolutely.
you're not a victim. You've got to take control and make the choices that you want to live the life that you want to live. And one of my favorite quotes is, focus on what you can control.
Mhm.
How have you used that in your life? Because I know you had to have.
I focused on what I could control, with the different hurdles as far as, not only was I homeless as a kid, which is out of my control, but I was homeless as an adult, which is somewhat in my control. Um, and having to, uh, you know, these were times that I struggled as a father and as a young father. So what pushed me through was focusing on my son and being an example for him, even though I'm struggling, whether it be physically, as a, depressed and overweight, or whether it be economically, as I was unemployed for a little bit and having to get help financially. But I knew that I had to keep moving forward, um, and and be a proper example for my son. So my son was definitely a big strength for me to keep pushing forward and realize that I can control my circumstance. So, like, just to give you an example, I was working for a company, a union job. I was getting paid a pretty good amount of money, but I hated the job. I ultimately got fired. Um, and this was a little bit after the 2008 crash. So unemployment was extremely high, and it took me about 10 months just to get my approval. I'm sorry, just to get my appeal for unemployment because I was initially denied. So I had to find a job, and the only job I could find, I was literally making half the amount of money. And I had my car repossessed months later, and all these different things that came about. But I knew that I had to kind of basically start over and looked for the next job making a couple more dollars and looked for another job making a couple more dollars until I ran into a position that opened up my career. And it's just those moments where even though I was up and down as far as being depressed and struggling, I knew that I had to keep going. I had at least some sort of a plan. After I was done pitying myself, I had a plan to keep moving forward. And my son has watched me grow as he was growing. So maybe he was too young to realize all the things that I was going through. But as I've matured and as I've had more success, he's matured and he sees my success.
You know, I love that you touch on some of your struggles and uh, things that you have gone through, because I think a lot of people look at people who have some success and they think it was always easy,
No.
that there was always something, you know, that it just went smooth, and maybe that they got lucky. You know, I don't believe that you get lucky. I think that you create lucky. And
Mhm.
it sounds like that's what you've done. I mean, you've gone from being unemployed to losing your job to all of this stuff. What kept you going? I mean, what what are some of the strategies or techniques? Because I'm sure we're in some turbulent times right now. And I'm
Mhm.
sure there's some people who are going through some struggles and heartaches and things like that. What were the things that kept you going, that when you lost a job and then you actually started way below where you were? I think a lot of people get caught up. I'm not going to do anything until I get back exactly where I was, you know, knocked down. So can we get a little bit of your mindset as you were going through those hurdles?
I would say the biggest thing is you go into survival mode. So, it comes to a point where you say to yourself, what is important at this moment? And what's the objective? Is my objective to make more money? All right, well, how can I make more money? And can I make it in a swoop? No, likely it's going to take time. So I had to do things in a very step-by-step process where I knew that I was going from a position where I was making $14 an hour, and I knew I had to find something where I could just inch up and I was making $16 an hour. And I was closer to work, so it was less driving. So it was incremental steps, or some people like to say baby steps. But it's those steps that you go through that actually help to build your character and build your strength. Um, and I would actually go back to my childhood, with being homeless and having some sort of insecurity for a period of time. It's kind of like a superpower, because on top of as a child and then once as an adult, not knowing where you're going to sleep, you start to realize that those moments help to build you up and make you stronger because you survived that particular situation. And I think a lot of people never make it to that point. Um, and then when it does happen, they don't know what to do. They kind of falter. So in some ways, even though being homeless is seen as a negative, in some ways it's a positive because I know that I can overcome and I can move past those particular moments. But as far as the general strategy, first, just understand that it's a process and nothing comes in a very quick way. My career has taken off, but it literally took over a decade of finally finding that one position to make my career take off. And it's that kind of patience that some people have to have, especially young men. They have to have, they want better economic opportunity, but they're comparing themselves to everybody else and they want it now. But they have to understand that those people that have things, it took them a long time to get there. And it's not that you should be envious of what they have, but you should enjoy the process getting there along the way.
You know what? I love your mindset with that, and I think they've done a study. There was a number one predictor of anybody being successful in life, and it was that long term perspective. And I
Mhm.
think we live in that world of instant gratification, get rich quick schemes, and I think everybody's kind of drawn to that. But the fact of loving the process and
Mhm.
understanding that it is a process, that you're eventually going to get there, because I truly believe, and we teach this at I Got Smarter, is if you have enough time, enough energy, and enough focus, you can accomplish anything in your life. And a
Mhm.
key element in there is time, having enough time, because we may look at these people who look like they're overnight successes, and most of them are, but that overnight took, decades to accomplish. And I love that you had that mindset. Go back to, I mean, and I want to get into your book as well, but I want to really peel back the mindset that you have. Where did that come from? Because it sounds like you had a tough childhood. It sounds like it didn't get any easier as you were an adult. That you had trials and struggles there. Where did this mindset come from? Did you listen to books? Did you have a mentor? Like where could somebody look to find the same type of mindset that you had that led you from very dire circumstances to being a successful person?
So, one thing that I don't think we advocate for enough is therapy. I had two significant moments in my life where I sought a therapist. With that job that I didn't like at all, I started having panic attacks at work. And I started staying at home on disability because of my panic attacks, which led to me having agoraphobia. I was afraid to leave the house. And I knew that was a problem. And that's when I sought a therapist. And at that moment, when I started going to see a therapist, we were working through childhood issues that I had. And it wasn't what I was expecting. I thought I was getting a strategy to go back to work, but I had underlying issues that I needed to resolve personally. And so that particular therapy process was extremely beneficial for me. It was months of therapy, sometimes two or three times a week, depending. Like in the beginning, it was about 3 times a week I was going to the therapist. And having to work through those different problems and having to build a strategy to keep moving forward really helped me. And then later on, I was having just kind of like adulthood struggles. And I went to a therapist who was less nurturing, but more like the best way I could say is keeping it real with me, just saying, no, here's what you got to do. And that's exactly what I needed. But we also discussed the issues that I was having and how to handle those particular problems. And so I think therapy was one of the biggest things to really help me. And it actually got me really interested in human behavior and psychology and just reading people and understanding people. And I personally think, while I'm not a therapist, um, I can examine people and understand people and become more empathetic. And it's helped me with my work life, with my personal life, love life, all of the above, because I now understand who I am and I understand the people that are around me, and I can see their flaws and understand where those flaws come from. And I think a lot of times we are judgmental of people, and we don't try to understand their circumstance, how they got to that point, and want to discuss it. But not to go too far off, but I would say the number one thing was therapy.
Yeah, love it. And I also love in your life, I mean, and I think we all have this choice, is we either have a stumbling block or a stepping stone, and
Mhm.
you choose what it is. And you continually chose to have these stumbling blocks turn into stepping stones.
Right.
Can you get into that a little bit?
Yeah, actually, one of the best things that ever happened to me was me losing my job. Um, that position I lost, that I wasn't enjoying. I was going through the process, of I was making like $14 an hour. Then I found another job making, I think it was like 16. And then I found another job where I was making $19 an hour. And I was like, this is it. It was better hours, closer to home. This is it. It was a temp to hire position. The end of the first week, I got the worst flu I probably ever had in my life. I felt like death, but I knew that I had to come to work. I'm a temp. And you know what it's like to be sick. You're just hazy and you're just staring there. And I came into work every single day. And finally, it was like, I think it was like the second week of being sick. I think it was like Friday. I was telling myself, Monday, I'm going to start fresh and I'm going to be good. The next day on that Saturday, I get an email saying that you've been let go. And I was let go basically in about 3 weeks of working there. So I didn't qualify for unemployment. And here I am. I thought I was inching my way up, and I lost my job again. And now here I am. I have no income. I'm a father, and I'm living at home with my mother. And I have no choice but to try and find work again. But that getting fired from that job and having about 3 months of no real income allowed for me to in some ways stumble across the perfect job to have my career flourish. So getting fired from that position, while it felt horrible, like I was considering joining the military. Like I didn't know what to do with my life at that point. And I came across a position that made my career explode from there. And it's those weird moments where you're like, that was the best thing to happen to me. Because let's say I didn't get fired and I stayed working there for a year making $19 an hour, and I never got that chance to flourish in the career that I actually wanted to flourish in.
You know what? I love biographies, and almost without exception, these people have had some sort of a situation just like that, where they've lost their job, they've been let go, the economy's happened, they've went bankrupt, they've gone through a divorce, whatever. And then they trace that back. Like if that never happened, I wouldn't have been able to get back to, get to where I was. So I agree with you 100%. These horrible things that seem like horrible things could be the best thing that ever happened to us. They get us out of our comfort zone, and they get us moving, having to get out of that comfort zone and start doing the things that we want to do. Well,
Absolutely.
let's get into your book a little bit. I want to talk about your book. Um, one of one of the things that I've been able to do in my life is change my story by telling myself a different story about the circumstances of my birth and everything that surrounded what I went through, with my family. Let's hear a little. I mean, it sounds like you've done that with yourself as well. Like you've changed your story. Tell us a little bit about what we can expect to find in the book, and a little bit more, about why you wrote it.
Sure. So the book, the best way I can put it is that the book is not one thing. It's a multitude of things. And while it's centered around Black Americans, much of what I talk about is a universal message. So, family, God, these are things that are universal, whether you're, if you're religious, irreligious, but these are concepts that we are all familiar with. And while, like I said, my book is centered around Black Americans, it's a unifying message. I have 9 chapters that are solution chapters. So I wanted to specifically not complain or point out flaws or point out issues and then just end the book. I wanted to have realistic solutions to help Black Americans, and in some ways help Americans just in general to get along better and to understand each other better. So much of my book, while I use stories talking about personal stories, and sometimes I'm using fictional stories just to paint a picture of what it's like for someone in a particular situation. I wanted this book to be universal. Anybody could read it. It doesn't matter what you look like. And I want it to be something that brings us together and not splits us apart. But a lot of my book is centered around accountability and responsibility. And for me personally, I realized that being accountable is not a bad thing. Being accountable is actually a powerful thing. And I think the narrative that we've set in America is that if I call you out on something, then I'm trying to chastise you. No, I'm trying to hold you accountable. And being accountable, if you're responsible for the issue, that means that you're capable of changing it, and that's power within it. But if I take away your power and I say that you're a victim, then you are powerless, and now you are relying on someone else to change your circumstance, which is unlikely to happen, and you will be suffering in the meantime. So, going from being a victim to a victor, it's something about being accountable for your actions, being responsible. If you messed up, and while I'm not necessarily trying to point fingers and shame any particular group or person, I'm being critical, and I'm even being critical of myself. I talk about how I shouldn't have had my child out of wedlock because I put him in risk of having similar type of issues like I went through. And that takes some sort of, I think, brave. It takes someone to be brave to look at themselves and say, I am flawed and I'm responsible for this particular outcome. But now that I'm responsible, I want to change it. So even though I had my son out of wedlock, I knew that I had to be the best father I could possibly be for the circumstance. And yeah, I guess what I'm ultimately saying is I want people to be accountable for their actions. And it's not to shame everybody and point fingers and saying you're wrong. It's just saying that you're not perfect. I'm not perfect. I'm not trying to be judgmental. We can all change and be better.
Do you see, I mean, we're kind of in a weird time in our history of America. Mm-hmm. Do you find that the victim mindset, going against that, do you find that that's not a popular topic nowadays? I mean, I definitely have. In my book, I think there's a lot of people out there who look at that and feel like there are victims out there. There's nothing that people can do, and I don't agree with that. Have you come across that? Mm-hmm. Have you talked about your book?
I've been very blessed. I've had an outrageous amount of support. And I think there are a lot of people that feel the same way that I do, that feel that there is a level of accountability that is missing from the narrative that is being spread. And I think that people understand that a lot of what we hear on the news, a lot of these stories that go around, they're perpetuating victimhood, and they're perpetuating stories that are either exaggerated, assumed, whether it be an assumption of racial animosity, an assumption of misogyny. It's a constant assumption, and it's something that someone is benefiting from. So whether it be politicians, whether it be the media for ratings, it's someone's benefiting from you being a victim. And I try to highlight that as a particular issue that I don't think a lot of people really think about. If someone makes money because you're in pain, that is not an industry that you want to applaud.
Yeah, love it. Well, Adam, we could go on forever. I love your message. I love what you're talking about. But what I like to do towards the end of my podcast is I'm a quote guy. I love quotes. I love listening to inspirational videos and podcasts and things like that. And I write these down, and then I like to get my guests' take on them. So I'm just going to read you a few quotes here, and you just kind of spitball it and let me know what these mean to you. Okay?
Absolutely.
We will almost always find treasure if we just keep digging.
We will almost always find treasure if we keep digging. I think what that tells me, the word that comes to mind is fortitude. One of the last lines in my book is that you're a victor if you're willing to see it, if you're willing to realize that. And if you're willing to dig to realize that you're a victor, basically what that quote is saying, that's showing the amount of fortitude that you have within yourself to keep pushing towards greatness.
Love it. Last one here. You will be amazed at what you can become when you do your best.
Yeah. This kind of goes back to what I originally said. Um, I sorry if someone is a-religious, but I am somewhat religious, and I personally believe that God has put a level of strength within this so that we can overcome those particular situations. And there's a lesson to be learned even from our failures. So I think I'm all for that quote.
Okay. Well, Adam, tell everybody where they can get in touch with you, where they can find your book. Go ahead.
Yeah, so a lot of the information you can find is on www.blackvictim2victor.com. You can go there, you can actually purchase a signed copy, or you can go to Amazon and Barnes and Noble and purchase a copy of the book. I'm also the founder of Wrong Speak Publishing, where we have very deep thinking, sometimes semi-controversial articles, but just stuff to inspire thought. So you can go to wrongspeak.net and read more on there. And I'm also on Facebook, facebook.com/Coleman Writes, or on Twitter under wrong_speak.
Great. Well, Adam, I appreciate you being on the show, man.
Thank
Very
you.
inspirational. Love your message. Keep it up. Keep getting that message out there, because I truly believe as soon as we stop being victims, then we can start being the products of what we choose to be. So thank you for that.
Absolutely.
I'd like to also thank all of our listeners. We appreciate your support. We'd also like to thank our sponsors, I Got Smarter, Goals Elevated, available at the App Store, and the book, The Unlucky Sperm Club. You are not a victim of your circumstances, but a product of your choices. Available everywhere books are sold, including Amazon and Audible. Until next time, I am your host, Nelson Tressler, signing off and reminding you, don't let your past poison your potential or your purpose. The best is yet to come. Best of luck until next time.